So let's go ahead and get started. I'm happy to be able to introduce our speaker today, Matt. I'm going to butcher your last name,
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Mahavang Chaco, best as I can do. Matt
Not
M
bad.
is what I like to get to. He graduated from UCI as well with a PhD in biological sciences back in 2018, and he is now the STEM specialist for the Division of Excellence of Teaching Excellence and Innovation. So we're really glad to have him. He also helped with our previous defense thesis seminar, and that was a great session a couple weeks ago in person live. So we're glad to be able to have you back, Matt. Go ahead and start sharing your screen, and I will pass it on to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Great. And Joanne, if you don't mind monitoring the chat, if there are any questions, if you could just let me know. Thank you. Can everybody see my screen okay? Thumbs up.
You're good to go.
Great. Thanks so much. Um, so thank you for the introduction. My name is Matt, and I am really excited to talk to you about this today for several reasons. The first is I actually just finished serving on a hiring committee for a position on campus. It's a professional position where we had interviewed 5 people, and it was all on Zoom. And I got to see what worked, what didn't work, and that actually played a huge role in who we eventually decided to have join us. This person actually did not have the most experience, nor were they the most well qualified, but their presence on Zoom helped propel them to the top because they were able to navigate not only the technology really well, but they also managed to navigate the space really well. And I'll talk to you a little bit more today about what that looks like and give you some tips, not only from what he did in his presentation, but also from what I've experienced and what I've read as well. All right. So today we've got a few session goals. The first is to discuss the importance of storytelling. If you were at the other session that I helped facilitate, you'll notice a couple of slides that are familiar. But if you were not there, I'll give you a brief overview on that, and then you can always ask Joanne for the presentation that she'll be able to send along to you. And then we're going to dive right in and then identify practices. This will be an interactive session. I'm just going to warn you now. We're going to be in breakout groups. We're going to be talking with each other. We're going to be standing up and trying something out. So if you have the ability to do that, then please, I encourage you to do it. And it will really help solidify some of these concepts in stone. All right, here's the agenda for the day. We've got 5 things. The first is we're going to have a warm-up discussion. This will be in breakout groups. The second is we're going to talk about the importance of storytelling. This is going to be important not only for if you're doing a job talk, but especially so if you're doing a presentation like a data presentation or something like that. We'll go over best practices for both virtual as well as hybrid scenarios, which the preparation is kind of the same, but there are a few things to keep in mind when you're thinking about a hybrid scenario versus a virtual scenario, which we'll go over. And then we're going to get some practice. You'll actually be placed back into your breakout groups and practice some of the skills that we'll talk about here and just kind of get a feel for how some of these things work for you or not. And then we're going to have a Q&A at the very end. I don't anticipate this taking the entire time, and I'm happy to stick around afterwards to answer any questions that you have. All right, so here we go. Here's our warm-up. And Joanne, if you could help me set up the breakout rooms, that'd be great. Thank you. We're going to have them in pairs. What I'd like you to do is to think back to a memorable virtual or hybrid meeting. It could either be a meeting, a presentation, maybe even like a YouTube video, like a TED Talk or something like that. Anything that is that's focused on the digital delivery. And I want you to think about what made it memorable and what questions do you have about giving a virtual or hybrid presentation. Before we send you off to breakout groups, does anybody have any questions about the instructions? All right, then I will give you about, and I'm just checking the clock here, about between like 7 and 8 minutes to get this done. I'll ask Joanne to give you a 2-minute countdown and then a 1-minute countdown, and then we'll come back into the main group. We'll see you in a bit. Welcome back. Just out of curiosity, if you could give me a thumbs up if you were able to see my screen when you were in your breakout rooms. Excellent. Thank you. The first few times I tried that, it didn't work. But then again, that was when they first rolled out with the feature. So I just wanted to make sure that it worked then. Okay, what I'd like you to do now is we're going to try out this technology tool. It's actually one of my favorite ones. It's called Slido. If you haven't used it before, this is a great way to get polling and also to share ideas at meetings. And we're going to try it out. So what I'd like you to do is either scan the QR code if you've got a phone, or just go to slido.com. It's going to ask you for a hashtag. Just put in GPS STEM. And then this slide should pop up, which is essentially asking you the same question. So what made the presentation memorable, and what questions do you have about giving virtual and or hybrid presentations? So I will give you a couple of minutes to put in your responses, and then we'll see what you all think. As you're typing, one of the things that I really like about Slido is if you take a look at the top of the slide right now, I could see exactly how many people are participating, how many people are typing. And then on the upper right, I'll be able to see how many responses we are getting through this interaction. Another couple things that are really good is that this could be integrated into PowerPoint, Google Slides, whatever sort of presentation software you have. And you can sorry, this comment just like caught me off guard. And you can actually save a lot of these for later analysis, which is really cool. And I'll show you exactly what this looks like later on, probably during the Q&A section. I will go for about another minute. All right, so as we're wrapping up here, I just want to scroll through and see what everyone's thinking. Also notice that we could have people put in your names, or we could just leave it anonymous. I chose to leave it anonymous, but that's up to you. So they also give you kind of a breakdown of the main words that appear, which is really nice. So you can pull out some themes. Of course, since this is focused on virtual and hybrid situations, it's not surprising that, for example, Zoom is number one. But it seems like a lot of people are asking questions about how to prepare for meetings, also about the tools to use, especially ones that will allow you to take the temperature of the room and have some interactive components. A lot of questions about hybrid talks, and I could just I could scroll down here and you could see kind of how where people are thinking. So hybrid presentations are tend to be asked about a lot, which is not surprising here. Also, what I like in this one in the middle here is about the screen on a speaker mode instead of gallery mode. You can actually, as a host, you can pin certain people as well. So if you have, for example, a panel or something like that, you can have them pinned so that even in gallery mode, everybody who's like a panelist can be pinned at the front, which is really cool. Um, like there are just so many things on here that are really good to see. And yeah, we're actually going to hit quite a bit of these today, especially with this internet kept crashing on a Zoom meeting. So I was just telling Joanne earlier that that happened to me once. And so I always have redundant systems up where I have my computer, which is where I'm presenting from right now. I have my tablet that's Zoom ready, and I have everything. Like if I did get disconnected from my computer, I can go to my tablet, and I also have my phone that has everything on there as well, just in case it's my internet that decides to die on me. Then at least I have 5G that can help me out there as well. So there are lots of ways that we can help mitigate some of these, and we'll go over them in a bit. Okay. So thank you all for participating in that. Again, this is a very good way um, to engage the audience using something like Slido. It's free to use for smaller meetings, so you can feel free to use that as much as you want. I wanted to bring your attention to a couple of things. The first is this is an article that I found that was back in 2015 that showed the growth of video for recruitment. And what they said was about nearly 3/4 of their companies that they polled use real-time video platforms such as Zoom, or back then it was Skype, um, to actually conduct these interviews. And that was before the pandemic. And now we know, of course, that with COVID and after COVID, a lot of people are doing virtual interviews now. As I said earlier, when we were hiring for this position I was a part of, um, all the candidates were invited to give their talks over Zoom. And it's just saving so much money, it's saving so much time. And it's just something that I think that moving forward, everybody's going to need to have a set of skills to be able to perform well in these scenarios. Also, I don't have the article here, but there were several articles from the employer side about what makes a candidate, like what are your pet peeves about a candidate when you're interviewing them in a virtual environment. And the number one unanimous thing is tech ineptitude. So when something goes wrong, they get flustered and they don't know what to do, or some things that aren't really in their control, like for example, lagging, that sort of thing. Those tended to be the top of their list. And so we're going to go through some ways here of how we can address those ahead of time to ensure that those do not become a factor when you are either giving a presentation or interviewing for a position. Okay. If you were here for my talk on the thesis and dissertation defenses, this slide will look familiar, but I think this is a general slide that is useful for anybody who's delivering a talk or an interview, which is to think about the story that you want to tell. And I've broken this up into 4 main steps. The first is the research part, the longer term preparation. Well, I'll just use a job interview for this example, but when you're researching the position and you're researching the company, you're researching their mission values, maybe their diversity statement or something like that. That is going to be the longer term research portion of your talk. And then you've got the short term prep, which is like immediately before the talk. What do you need to prepare? For example, I have water with me. Oh, goodness, my coaster is coming up with it. I have my water with me at all times. I have with me all my slides in one place so that I can I could preview what is coming up next. I make sure that I have a background that's pretty good. Like all of those things are right before you give your talk or attend your interview, and then you deliver it. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the actual delivery, so I won't talk about it here. And then it's all about the post delivery as well. If you're doing a job interview, make sure that you're following up with people. It doesn't have to be like the minute after you sign off on a Zoom call, but within an hour, a couple hours, just send a note, thank people for their time and for the opportunity. That post delivery is something that not a lot of people think about. And it's very important to follow up with the people who you're talking with, especially if it's for business or if it's for a job interview. So I want to go over some important parts about storytelling. And I split this up into two sections. The first focuses on the stories themselves. What is the purpose? The purpose here is to persuade someone of something. If it's a job talk, you're persuading them that you are the person for the job. Bring in the context. If I'm looking at a resume or a CV, there's only so much that I can learn from reading what's on there. You can bring in the context that's not on there. You could bring in everything that surrounds the facts that you've put in your application. You can provide interactions between you and your audience as well. You ask them questions, go back and forth. You can have polling, things like that. And stories are memorable. Some of the best, I mean, think about like human evolution, right? For millions of years, well, millions of years, for I'm horrible at evolution, but I'm going to say like tens of thousands of years at least. People have been telling stories orally or written down, and there's a reason why that gets passed on in culture, and it's because a lot of the stories are very memorable. So when we think about good storytellers, there are a few that I think make somebody a very good storyteller. The first is the connection with the audience. If you don't connect with your audience, then no, it's not going to be memorable. If you know a little bit about a lot and a lot about a little, that's also going to help. You are the one who knows the most about your experiences. If this is a job talk, you know your story, you know your history better than anybody else. So you know a lot about something that's very niche, which is your life, but you also know a little bit about a lot. So that if you can talk about your experiences within different contexts or apply them to different scenarios, that's going to help people see where they can insert you into different areas of either the company or the school or whatever the department. If you want to take control of the space, that's a really good thing to do as well. On Zoom or whatever other virtual platform or hybrid, it's a little bit more difficult to do that. And we'll go over some tools of how exactly to take control of that space because it is different. And then also to speak less and speak slowly. At this last panel that I was a part of for this hiring committee, one of the people who had the most experience didn't get the job, but they were speaking at a rapid fire pace. And because of that, there was really no way for us to ask follow-up questions. It was just information overload. I was taking notes and I had to skip a bunch of things because I just couldn't type fast enough. That's how fast this person was speaking. And so really choose your answers carefully and choose how you want to deliver them carefully. If this is for a job talk, what I always like to tell people is it's okay to take a beat when you're asked a question and to really think about your answer and outline it a little bit before you start talking. And that's totally fine. And you can be transparent with your committee and tell them, at the very beginning, for example, this is what I did when I was interviewing for this position. I said, when you ask me a question, I would just like about 10 seconds to formulate my thoughts so that I can answer it as succinctly as possible. And they really appreciated that in the end. If you want more information, I've got a couple of resources here, same resources that I shared at the other workshop. But these two are on charisma. How do you maximize charisma? How do you learn charisma? And how do you talk in a way that comes off as both very heartwarming, but not like unprofessional. And so these are very good resources to use if you are interested in learning more about charisma. I'm just checking the time here. We are good. Awesome. Okay, so the next part is to think about the actual preparation. And this is going to be the meat of what we're going to discuss before we move on to our practice session. So what I'd like you to do when you're thinking about your virtual hybrid talk is to think about the story. How does the story tell this series, either the series of events that have led you to be where you are right now, or if you're giving a presentation, what is the story of whatever you're trying to present? What is the title? What are the supporting characters? What is the background information that people need to know in order to understand your story? And then outline the agenda. And I want to give you a quick example of what exactly that looks like. For every presentation that I give, every talk, I always have an agenda, something like this, where I map out exactly what is going to be going on. And I map it out to the minute. So that way I can take a look and I could see where I'm at and make sure that I stay on task. This is especially important if you have a lot of information that you want to get across and you need to reel it in because you don't want to say, oh no, we've got 5 minutes left and I have 20 slides to go through, and then you just go at a rapid fire pace. So to have a plan like this really goes a long way. And then you want to set the scene. What room do you want to use? What do you want your background to be? So if you want to, I've seen people where they have, bookshelves in the background, and they specifically position certain books to be in focus, so that could be like a conversation piece or something. But make sure that you think about the room that you're in intentionally. Think about your internet connection. If you just do a search and just type in internet speed test, it'll tell you your upload and download speeds, and that'll tell you whether or not you've got good internet. If you can, plug in your computer directly into your modem or your router, and that'll ensure that you've got the fastest internet there. The other thing is front lighting. When you have lighting that is not good, then you're not going to look that great on camera. So, for example, right now I've got a big window in front of me with a lot of light that's reflected through the window, so I become illuminated. But if I had zero, okay, I wonder if I could. Hold on, I'm going to try something. I'm going to close this window, and okay, so now the window's closed. And you can see that now my front lighting is horrible, and oh, it's trying to adjust. Okay, so that's actually not too bad because Zoom does a good job now. But without that front lighting, sometimes it'll be a little difficult to see you, and you won't be in a good light. Get it? Good light. Anyway, the last thing is about attire. Uh, you want to dress the part, and just because you're at home or whatever, or like I have PJ pants on right now, and that's totally fine, right? Because we're on a Zoom call and you can't see my PJ pants, you can't see my Woodstock and Snoopy on my pants. But if you were going to get up and walk around, or especially if you're giving a hybrid talk, you want to make sure that you're dressed appropriately. And then one thing that's really, really good is to check the tech. Make sure that your notifications are off, especially if you use your computer for a lot of things. You don't want those random ads or whatever to pop up like through an email or something like that. Make sure your computer's updated and that your Zoom is updated. You don't want to sign on 2 minutes before you have to give a presentation only to say, hey, you got an update and this is a 4 GB update and it's going to take you 20 minutes. Make sure those updates are done. And then also backups. And I'll show you an example of a backup right now. So I'm going to unblur my background. Excuse the mess. Okay. So I've got, whenever I give talks, I always have, for example, this right next to me. So I've got my slides on the left and my agenda on the right, so that I know exactly what's coming up and when. This helps a lot with transitions, so that I'm not saying, oh, I wonder what's coming up next. I know exactly what's coming up because I could see it before I come back to the screen. And I also have a clock right here as well. And that helps out a lot. Okay, I'm gonna re-blur my couple other things to keep in mind. When it's appropriate, make sure you engage your audience. Sometimes engagement is not appropriate. Don't do it. But you should clarify the interaction and note-taking guidelines. So just like at the beginning of this, I said, if this is going to be interactive, we'll have a discussion. We're going to go off into breakout groups. We're going to practice, which we'll do in a minute. Clarify all that ahead of time so that people know what to expect. And then consider having a chat mod. So right now, Joanne is graciously serving as my chat mod, where she is monitoring the chat. Thank you. And anything that pops up that needs my attention, she can feel free to interrupt me and then say, oh, in the chat, someone's asking about this or whatever.
We do have a question if you want.
Okay, perfect.
Good timing. So, Vinny, did you want to ask your question, or am I happy to ask on your behalf?
I can ask. That's fine. I just asked about if there's different standards for different industries in terms of video chatting software. Joanne says academia tends to be Zoom, industry tends to be Teams, Microsoft Teams. And I asked if it's company specific. Is it worth learning all these video chatting like languages? Or do you think it's like kind of better to figure out which one you're going to use first? Like kind of, is it I guess the underlying question there is that a marketable skill that you might want to add? I've been doing some like career prep stuff too, and I know at least for the career that I want, they say that being proficient with like being able to have virtual meetings is really good. But anyway, yeah, I know that was a mouthful, but it's in the chat if you want to take a look at the question.
Oh, no, I think I've got it. Yeah, so Jan's right, where academia tends to be Zoom, and industry, all of the industry meetings that I've had have been over Teams, or there's another one that they like to use. I forget exactly what it is. But I've always, whenever I've had to give a presentation, especially for in industry, and my industry experience is just being a science writer for different companies like Biorad and some other places. I've always been able to dictate what platform I'm going to use if I'm the one giving the presentation. But if I'm going to be part of somebody else's presentation, then they'll say, "Oh, we're going to meet over, Microsoft Teams," and I'm horrible at Microsoft Teams. And so for me, I just downloaded it, get a good feel for what it's like. I watch a couple of videos, and then that's about it. But for the most part, for me, I've been able to dictate the platform that I want to use. So I always just stick to Zoom because that's what I know best. I don't know if that answers your question. Oh, but also the marketable skills. Yeah, that's definitely marketable things, because you can be essentially a virtual meeting chameleon, right? Going in and out of different platforms, and that can help out a lot, especially if you're in a business and you have to come off as being technologically competent. Then that is something that you could definitely put down, like on a resume or CV or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's another thought I'm having now is it could be like particularly important if you are going to get a role where you're going to be interacting with folks from academia, folks from industry, basically people that are using all these different softwares. If you're going to be interacting with them simultaneously, that could be a very marketable skill. Thank you.
Yes, it is. And one thing to note also is that if you are interacting with a lot of people in academia, the different academia licenses for Zoom could have different capabilities. So it's also important to keep that in mind as well, too, that if you're going to be the one leading something, that you know exactly what you're capable of doing with either the platform they're giving you or the platform that you're using. Cool. Does that answer your question? Great. Thank you. And then the last step for this when appropriate stage here is to select your technology tool if you're going to use it. Tech tools are very useful to facilitate collaboration. We used Slido earlier. One that I really also like doing, especially for business meetings, is Miro. If you haven't heard of that before, you can look it up, but essentially it's a digital whiteboard that allows for a lot of collaboration to take place. And it's just a great tool to use. So just make sure that you're choosing the tech tool and that you test it out first, so that you're not scrambling when it comes to presentation time. In general, practice, but don't memorize. Don't have a script. It is so obvious. Having been on the interview side of things, like the interviewer side of things, it's so obvious when people have their answers memorized. And I don't like that. I like at all. I love it when it comes off as more organic. Even if you're stumbling on a couple of things, like I much rather have that organicness to it compared to something that just sounds robotic. So don't memorize. If necessary, you can have like sticky notes with bullet points or something like that. But definitely don't memorize any sort of script. Okay, and then this is where we're going to have a little bit of practice, which is to check your posture, stand, and animate. So right now I'm sitting in a chair, but my back is straight. And the reason why I wanted to go over posture is because posture will dictate how much air you have in your lungs and also how your voice projects. If I'm kind of slouched over like this and I'm still trying to project as much as I can, you could probably hear a difference in my voice compared to like if I'm just sitting up like this, it projects very differently because my lungs have a little bit more space. What somebody had recommended that I thought was a really cool idea is to stand and actually just, even if you're at home, because when you're standing, that puts you in the stance of presentation. So I'd like you to do right now, we'll just take 15 seconds to do this. Make sure that you're muted. But just just introduce yourself to nobody in particular. Just be like, hi, my name is Matt. That's all you gotta say. So go ahead and do that for the next 5 seconds. Okay, now what I'd like you to do is just stand up. So just scoot your chair back, and you're probably gonna see my PJs, but that's fine with me. So just stand up and then just say the same thing. Just say, hi, my name is Matt, whatever your name is. Give you a few seconds. Okay, and then sit back down. Did anybody notice a difference? I can't actually see everybody on my screen, so I don't know if people like nodding their heads. You can feel free to give me a thumbs up or unmute yourself and share if you'd like. Kind of, sort of. Okay. So standing can help. Personally, I like to sit because I know that I can keep my back straight. But also animate, use hand gestures or whatever, things like that. It can go a long way. But one thing I wanted to emphasize is looking into the camera. When you are giving a talk and you're looking, so right now I'm looking at the people at the at all of the like the gallery of attendees, and you could tell that I'm looking somewhere else right now. But if I look directly at the camera, this is what's going to help you create that connection, because when you look at the camera, then you are making virtual eye contact with the people who are on the other side of the screen. And this can go a long way with creating that sense of connection with the people in front of you. It's just like if you've ever watched a series and somebody is clearly reading a teleprompter, and you could see like their eyes aren't exactly looking at the camera and they're just reading something, versus if they're looking straight at the camera, it's a very different feel. Yevin?
Yeah, I've always thought about this and never really knew what the guidance was in terms of what to do. Because I feel like when you look at a camera, of course, like your audience is getting that like sense of security and that like you're speaking to them. But then I feel like I'm speaking to nobody. So is that like the guidance, is to look into the camera and just kind of like speak into the abyss because it helps your audience connect with you more?
I mean, I wouldn't say speaking into the abyss. The way that I actually view the camera is I actually think about the camera as someone's eye, so that it's like I'm making eye contact. But I totally understand what you mean. And yes, the general consensus is you should be looking into the camera, not the whole time, but at least part of the time, to make that connection with the audience.
Okay, so I'm gonna buy some googly eyes and put them right around my camera, and then I'll feel like I'm looking at somebody.
There you go. There you go. That works out. I know some people sometimes they'll put like a picture of like a person or like I don't know, someone in the background to make it work, but I don't know. Whatever works. All right.
We have
And
a
then
couple more questions in
oh,
chat.
sure. Let's see.
Specifically about laser pointers and cursors.
Yeah, so laser pointers and cursors, I am actually not a fan of using either one for a virtual talk. If I'm giving a virtual talk, like you could use a cursor and that's fine, but I would prefer animating things ahead of time to highlight something instead of using the digital laser. But if you are, that being said, I have been to some meetings where they've been really good at using lasers, turning it on and off, which I think trips up a lot of people. And that can work out really well. Just personally, I prefer to build all of the focus animations into the slides themselves. Were there any other questions on that I need to attend to? Perfect. I want to go on to unique steps for hybrid delivery, because I think hybrid is a very unique platform, because you've got people who are both in person and virtual. And the number one thing that I could recommend is to try to schedule this in a room that will actually work. What I mean by that is, if you've been on campus, you might have noticed since COVID that a lot of the rooms have been retrofitted for hybrid meetings, where now there's a huge screen in the front. There's maybe a dedicated Zoom console. I know McGaw Hall has a few of these. And then people can sit around a table. Matt's side one, Joanne, where we were at the for the other workshop that we were doing. I think it's 1114, right? Something like that. Yeah. So that one is equipped very well for hybrid because there are 3 microphones all over the ceiling, which helps out with projection. So just trying to get a room that's going to work with the technology will go a very long way. I also recommend doing or thinking digital first. What I mean by that is if you're the type of person who likes to pass out paper, right, and say, okay, well, here, I want you to write something down and blah, blah, blah. Well, you can't guarantee that the people who you're speaking to virtually are actually going to have any of that. So think digital first, and then that way you can incorporate everybody instead of just the people who are sitting physically at your meeting. There was a question about this on the Slido, which was how do you address the online participants? And one of the ways that I recommend, if possible, just like what this picture is showing, is to have them on the screen so that they are also, I mean, they don't know that they're life-sized or larger than life at the moment, but they will be in the context of the meeting itself. If you can get a place where you've got 2 screens, like if you need to like present on one screen and then show your Zoom participants or your virtual participants on another screen, that's even better. Because that way, not only will they feel involved, it's easier for you to see if there are hands, you can read their facial expressions a little bit more. Just having that separate screen can really help bring in your virtual audience as well. And then lastly, if you are doing a hybrid delivery, pass the microphone if you're in person. Even if someone says, oh, I have a question, but I can project my voice. I guarantee you they won't be able to project as well as they think they can. And so if you're facilitating in person and you've got a microphone, just say, you know what, for the sake of of everybody, it's just an accessible thing in general. Please use the microphone when you have a question or a comment so that everybody can hear. And that's not just including our virtual participants, but everybody in the room. So those sorts of things can go a very long way. And also, if you build in intentional time to address your online participants, like if there's a natural stopping point or you have a question and saying something like, okay, let me see first if our virtual participants have posted something in the chat, and making sure that you address them there, that can really help pull them into the engagement of the room itself. All right, I'm just checking my time here. Are there any other questions, either Joanne in the chat or anybody else? You can feel free to digitally raise your hand before we move on. Yeah, is it Nitish? Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong.
No, it's fine. Nitish, Nathan, anything works for me. Regarding Zoom fatigue, right? I think everyone's super overwhelmed with a lot of meetings. So how do we somehow keep people's attention throughout our meeting or presentation? And
Yeah.
also, how do we deal with it ourselves more than anyone else? Yeah.
Sure. So the question is about Zoom fatigue. I've got 4 things to keep in mind. The first is to think about whether or not a meeting is actually necessary. There are a lot of meetings that happen that do not need to happen. So if that meeting is not necessary, 86-8, just get out of there. But if it is necessary, then keep it as short as possible. And our attention span in person is very different when you're surrounded by people who have energy compared to an hour of you sitting at your computer at home like this with your hands behind your head and thinking about what you want for lunch, right? That's a very different energy. So try to keep the meetings as short as possible. Insert in collaboration. So we had some Slido earlier. We did some Q&A. We're going to have a little bit of practice in a bit where you're going to be placed into breakout rooms. So that can also help. And then also something else that has just left my brain. And if it comes back into my brain, I will bring it up. So we'll say 3 + 1 later tips that you can use for Zoom fatigue. Hope that answers your question. I'm gonna assume that's a yes. Okay, David?
Yes. So you mentioned that you're not a fan of laser pointers and you like to animate. I tend to agree with that. But I have seen people teach or even give research seminars where they have their tablet mirrored to their computer, and they use a stylus to, draw on their slides. Arrows, question marks, circling things, and I found that to be really effective. What do you think about that?
Yes, I totally agree that that is a very effective thing to do. And because Zoom and PowerPoint are actually so good at it now, especially with the latest round of updates over the past few months, annotation is just really a powerful tool to use as well. I'm a huge fan of I think I said animation, annotation. I'm a fan of annotating. Any other questions? Okay, then what I'd like you to do is we are going to have a little bit of practice. In the chat, I'm going to put in a Google Doc link. This will link to the tips that I had put on the last few slides. And we're going to place you back in pairs. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think about one of these 5 options and to talk about them in your pairs. So if you are thinking about giving an elevator pitch, you can practice that. An interesting story about yourself, the best talk you've attended, why cereal should be considered a soup, and I argue that it should be, or anything else that, yes, I got a thumbs up from Dave, and anything else that comes to mind. I want to give you about maybe 6 minutes, so you'll each have 3 minutes, so just enough time for that elevator pitch if you decide to do that, and then we will go ahead and come back in for some closing thoughts. So before letting you go, there was a question in the chat about different platforms, PowerPoint, PDF, and I forget the other, Keynote. I don't think there's a difference there. A lot of times you could do a lot of things in PDF if you make things as a PowerPoint and then save them as a PDF. You can do some animations there as well. The one thing that I do like is Prezi. If you've used Prezi before, it's a really great presentation tool. It looks really cool. You can go into different areas of your presentation whenever you want. But there are templates that exist for that sort of thing as well in PowerPoint. So, the more fancy you get, the more likelihood that things are going to go wrong. So just keep that in mind as you're choosing something, especially if it's an innovative technology tool, to be sure that you are comfortable enough using it. All right, so that brings us to the end. We're right at 1 o'clock. So I'm going to stick around for the next few minutes just in case any of you have any questions. But I want to thank you all for your attendance and good luck with your virtual or hybrid talks.